Hey everyone, thank you for joining me on my town hall today. Today we are going to be talking about sportsmen and about conservationists, and I am honored to have Harold Daub, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen and Conservationists, as my guest. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for doing it. I really appreciate it. I'm a member of the Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen and Conservationists. I love what you guys do. And for those people who don't know, could you just kind of give a summary of what you all are about and how you came to be?
Absolutely. So the Pennsylvania Federation originally was called Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen's Clubs. And it was formed back in 1932 by my favorite story goes that they were founded by 5 angry fishermen. And the reason that those fishermen were angry was because back in the 20s and early 30s, there were no regulations on the mining industry. So these fishermen would go off to their favorite trout streams, and they were finding them to be polluted and all the fish were dead. And they decided to have a meeting. They met in New York City, Pennsylvania Hotel, and they formed this nonprofit organization that here we are 88 years later, and we're still out here fighting for everything that has to do with the outdoors. And I'm proud to be the executive director of this organization. We continue to fight the good fight, make sure that we're protecting our resources and representing the Pennsylvania hunters, sportsmen of all types, conservationists of all types, and anybody that really has an interest and a love for the outdoors, wild things, wild places. And I appreciate you having me on to talk about it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to me, you know, the environment is one of my great loves. Pennsylvania is just drop dead beautiful. I mean, everywhere you look, Pennsylvania is showing you something that is just jaw dropping. And, you know, for people who don't know me, I've grown up in a family of hunters. I married into a family of hunters. So, you know, it's something I've been around all my life. And I don't hunt specifically, but I am a member. And so, you know, I think there's a broad range of people who are members with you. Can you kind of describe a little bit about the type of people that you represent or what your membership base looks like?
Sure. As is the case with a lot of outdoor activities, we're not diverse enough. I will start off by saying that. So I appreciate, Patty, that someone like you that maybe is not actively hunting at the moment, but you chose to belong to this organization because we're fighting to protect outdoors, the wild places that our wildlife need to live. And you know, that's the thing that people have to understand about hunters and state game lands. Organizations like PFSC or the National Wild Turkey Federation, when the habitat is improved, it's improved for everything, from the tiniest bee to the largest bear. They can take advantage of the improved habitat, the food sources that are created when our Game Commission folks go out and burn off a field of invasive crown vetch and release all of the seeds that have been dormant in the soil for many, many, many years. You end up getting milkweed. And I've had friends who had no interest in hunting, fishing, trapping, or any of the activities that are usually associated with an organization like mine, who, when we went for a tour of the game lands and they saw all of the milkweed, they were monarch butterfly enthusiasts. So they were just thrilled to death that Pennsylvania hunters are contributing to these wild places in a clean environment. So that's the folks that we're attracting to PFSC. We want everybody in Pennsylvania that's concerned with environment, that's concerned with conservation, to be speaking with one voice. And And I appreciate coming on your town hall here today, because I do believe that you're going to expose my organization to some folks that maybe wouldn't have looked at us and considered joining us. So after they do that, if they'd like to join, they can join us at www.pfsc.org. And when you go to our website, you'll hit the join button, and you'll have a menu there that you can pick what type of membership works best for you. You can be a member of my organization for as little as $15 a year, if you're okay with reading the digital material on your device.
Yeah. And I think that's really good to point out, because I think, you know, some people may look at the group and say, oh, that's just a bunch of hunters, you know, they have nothing to do with me. I don't hunt, right? But I'm a gun owner. I like to go to the range. My husband and I go to the range all the time and shoot. You know, people like that would be members, and you're supporting them and protecting their rights. But you do a lot of conservation. And I think that people don't understand how beneficial hunters are to Pennsylvania. There's a federal act that some people may or may not know, called the Pittman-Robertson Act. That's a mouthful. But basically what that is it's a tax on guns and ammunition, and that tax goes into a fund. And then every year it's dispersed to states based on how many hunting licenses they have. And that money gets used by Pennsylvania to do all kinds of things. You know, it buys state game lands. It goes to protecting habitat, protecting the wildlife with studies and things like that. And so without Pennsylvania hunters involved, none of that would exist here in Pennsylvania. And I think that's really important to point out, because it really is a service that hunters provide that all kinds of people take advantage of across the state.
I bet it would be very odd for you to hear from a group of people requesting that they be taxed. But that's exactly what happened with the Pittman-Robertson Act, the Wildlife Restoration Act. Conservationists decided, hey, if we can pay a bit of an excise tax at the point of manufacture, and it's roughly about 11% on firearms, ammunition, archery equipment. We asked for it as conservationists back in 1937. And that's what this organization is about. One of the first key pieces of legislation that PFSC was involved in was the Clean Water Act of 1937. And we were instrumental in getting that passed. So, I mean, everybody, you know, we may have different opinions about certain topics, but I'll bet that there's very few of us out there that don't want to have clean water, clean air, and clean environments. And that's the cornerstone of PFSC. That's what we're about.
Yep, absolutely. And that's really what I like about groups like yours, is that there's a lot of different voices who come together as members. And it's a group that welcomes all voices. You know, you don't, like you just said, we may not agree on all topics, but when you boil it down to the foundation and the fundamentals, that's where we can all get together on. And I embrace that in my personal life. And I really admire groups that embrace that wholeheartedly, like yours does. Because like you said, when you come together as one voice, that's when you're strong.
Yeah. You know, a great example of the way conservation works and how hunters contribute to that is how many people that are watching this town hall are thrilled with the sight of a bald eagle flying over Pennsylvania. Well, that restoration of our bald eagle population was done through conservation, and it was done through the Pennsylvania Game Commission, which is funded by Pennsylvania hunters. Yeah. You know, you look at the water quality that we have and the streams that we have and rivers we have to fish in. The Pennsylvania Fish Commission does a great job. Our DCNR agency and our DEP agency. We are very blessed in Pennsylvania to have these world-class agencies that are looking out for our environmental concerns and protecting our resources.
Yeah. And sadly, sorry, the new rules with Zoom make me admit people one by one. So somebody just popped up. My apologies. But, sadly, I found it interesting that the group was started um, by fishermen who were upset with the water quality back then.
Yep.
And here we are, many years later,
Yep.
in the same situation, right? They're catching cancerous fish in the Susquehanna River, here in the Harrisburg area. I was a manager of a local sewer authority. And when I took over as managers, one of the first questions I had for our engineer was, where can I take my dogs to play in water, that's safe?
Mm-hmm.
And his answer was, define safe. He didn't, that was his answer. And I was like, holy cow, what kind of answer is that? And he's like, Patty, yeah. I said, well, I want them to be able to drink out of the water they're splashing around in. And he said, I wouldn't risk it. And that really made me pause. And in working with the sewer authority like I did, I realized just how much work we need to do on our streams and our waterways here in Central PA, because a lot of people depend on that for recreation, for their business. And, in my opinion, we aren't doing enough to clean those up. I mean, I won't mention any names, but there's a certain sewer authority here that dumps raw sewage into the Susquehanna still. That's a major problem.
Yeah.
And without groups like yours working with other groups who are fighting for clean water and conservation, those things would just run amok and would never, ever improve.
Right. And you just hit on the key to, no matter what the issue is, working together is very important. And that's the niche of PFSC. I'm a life member of the National Wild Turkey Federation, a life member of the NRA, a member of Delta Waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited, Quality Deer Management Association. All of those organizations have their little niche, and they're doing a great job at their mission. The PFSC mission is to represent, to bring people together, to bring organizations together, and speak with one voice. And what we do, I'm involved in a lot of different collaborations with organizations both that belong to PFSC and some that don't. Some of our national organizations are not permitted to sign on as an affiliated member of a state organization like ours. But that doesn't mean we don't work together.
Right.
And that's what's important. We got to come together on these things and understand what's important and what our goals are. And it's very, very much an effective technique to be consolidated and working together, and letting our legislature know that we represent an awful lot of people that want it done this particular way. And I get excited about promoting and supporting ideas, but we also, have to go to bat now and then on things that we don't agree with. And it certainly is easier to win those battles when you're speaking with one voice.
Yeah.
And that's what PFSC is here to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Because sadly, in politics these days, it's whoever has the loudest voice or the most money wins at the Capitol here in Harrisburg. And that's not how government is supposed to run. It's not how it was set up to run, but it's how it's been corrupted. And, we shouldn't have to play that game to win. We shouldn't have to play that game to represent our wildlife that can't speak for itself, our environment that can't speak for itself. But here we are, right? So we've got to play the hand we're dealt. And that goes back to exactly what you just said. When groups work together, and you're not going to agree on everything, but when you come together on a topic you agree on and you speak in mass, they have no choice but to pay attention.
We're not going to win the battles with money. We're just not a wealthy organization, but we can certainly win the battles through coordination and speaking with one voice and consolidating the voices of a whole bunch of different organizations. And I do want to mention, we do have affiliated clubs that are joining PFSC. And if there's anyone listening here that belongs to an organization and they'd like information about how their organization can become part of PFSC, I would ask them to please reach out to me. I'm easily found on Facebook. My email address is Dauber, Dauber, at pfsc.org. And I would love to hear from any organization, any gun clubs, sportsmen's associations, fishing clubs, any type of organization at all that is concerned with clean environments, protecting our resources. Let's get together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had a big win this past year. Well, going back a couple years, actually, how time flies. Feels like it was just yesterday, but you were pushing and trying to get past the Sunday hunting, which had a significant amount of opposition initially, which really surprised me. You know, I think some of the things that was brought up is that, you know, animals need a day of rest where they're not being tracked and hunted, which, you know, doesn't hold true when you look at the research, and that hikers and other people want to have a day in the woods where they're not at risk of being shot. But I admired how you approached it, because, you know, a lot of things that go on nowadays is propaganda based and not rooted in truth. And a lot of the things that they were opposing with the Sunday hunting were examples of just that. You know, there's been Sunday hunting for what? Forever on certain species, and people didn't know it.
Yeah.
And so
we've been hunting coyotes, foxes, and crows since roughly the 80s on Sundays here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And you can share the woods with a hunter as a hiker and never really know it. And, you know, people worrying about being shot, that doesn't hold true either in terms of the research and statistics. But what I found really interesting was that people didn't understand or didn't want to understand that the sportsmen buy the state game lands. And yet here they are telling the sportsmen who purchased that property, you can't have access to it. And I was really proud of the way that you stood up to that and that you maneuvered that minefield that you had. It wasn't a complete win. You know, you got 3 days or 4 days, I think it was.
We got 3 days coming this year, yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting 2-year fight that we were in there. And you hit on it. You know, when you look at state game lands or even private lands, and somebody that's a hunter was the only activity that was being excluded from being allowed to be done on their own land or on the state game lands that Pennsylvania hunters are responsible for purchasing. So that was kind of the message we took to the people. And at that time, I was not working for PFSC, but PFSC does support having Sunday hunting regulated by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And that's really what that argument was about. It wasn't about we want to hunt everything on every Sunday. What it was getting legislature out of conservation and out of wildlife management. We have an agency in the Pennsylvania Game Commission. A lot of people want to fight with them about everything you can think of under the sun. A lot of what we want to fight the Game Commission on are things that they really don't have any control over. And Sunday hunting was one of those. So, you know, we have a terrible disease in the United States, and it is coming and is here in Pennsylvania now, and that's chronic wasting disease, CWD. That's going to, you know, if that becomes very prevalent in Pennsylvania, that's really going to impact hunting and conservation and wildlife in general. And we need to make sure that the decisions on how we're going to manage our wildlife we want those decisions made by the experts, the subject matter experts in the field of wildlife management. We don't want politicians on a political whim deciding what we can do, when we can do it, how we can do it, those types of things. The Game Commission has a process. A lot of people say they don't listen. I say they can't hear us if we don't speak to them. And that's another thing that PFSC does for conservation in Pennsylvania is we do have a good working relationship with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. It doesn't mean that we agree on everything. We disagreed with the way they regulated the 3 Sundays that we were permitted this year. We felt, as PFSC, we felt that it should have been more than just the big game species that they put in place for this year. But we continue to work together with all of our resource agencies, the Game Commission, the Fish Commission, DCNR, and DEP. Even though we may not agree on everything, we agree on most things. It's kind of like you and I, Patty, right? You know, we don't agree on, we could list 100 things. We may not agree on all 100. So we choose to make sure we focus on the 98 or so that we agree on.
Yeah.
And that's how we at PFSC tried to work with our resource agencies. It's just a better way to make the world work, you know?
Absolutely. And, you know, you're never going to agree with anybody, not even your spouse, on 100% of things.
Right.
And so the trick is learning to navigate the issues that you don't agree on, so that you don't alienate people, and so that you listen, like truly listen, with an open mind. And that, I think, is missing nowadays, sadly. I think we've lost that.
PFSC has, you know, people that did not support the Sunday hunting effort.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's very little that we can bring to the table that I would expect 100% of people would agree to. I don't know, maybe releasing balloons into the environment is something that we can all agree to, but
let's talk about that, shall we? That is a pet peeve of yours, and it is a pet peeve of mine. So we're talking about people who release balloons for a celebration or in memory of something, or just at the fair because it wasn't tied around your kid's wrist good enough.
I'm not too upset about those. Those accidental releases, okay, but the cutting loose of like 50 balloons, that one kills me.
Yeah, because they have to come back down, and they end up in our waterways, they end up in the woods, and animals don't understand that it is not edible. They don't understand that they need to steer clear so they don't get tangled in the lines. Yeah. And it really is wreaking havoc in our environment. And I know I've seen your posts, and I've seen a lot of other people who post all the balloons that they're finding. Like, we're not talking about one every year or so. It's not a random episode, right? You see them a lot.
2 Wednesdays ago, I was floating down the Susquehanna River with the president of the Pennsylvania Outdoor Writers Association, and I looked over and I saw a red Mylar balloon along the bank of the Susquehanna. I was floating between Millersburg and Duncannon at that time. And sure enough, a little bit further down, there was another one. And that's that Mylar stuff, you know, that's going to be there a long time. Yeah. And I always tell people, I say, look, if you took 50 balloons and you release them and they fly up into the air, would you take 50 candy bar wrappers or 50 soda cans and throw them on the ground and feel the same way about it? And they don't. So yeah, I think that's some legislation that we might get 100% on, Patty.
Yeah, call me when you're ready. I'm ready, or maybe okay. I'll call you when I'm ready.
But that is a pet peeve of mine. People do laugh about that one.
I agree. I agree. But I do want to kind of circle back to hunters, because I think it's a little misunderstood, right?
Absolutely.
And you know, I'm an animal lover. I do not kill bugs in my house. I don't kill spiders in my house. I pop a cup over them. I slide a paper in and out they go. And I know you're not going to like this answer, but I don't even kill the stink bugs. They go back outside. I know they're an invasive species, but I love wildlife. And so people look at me and they say, well, how can you be married to a hunter? How can those two things coexist within yourself? And my answer to them is that, you touched on the CWD. When you have overpopulation of any species, you're going to introduce disease and they're going to suffer. That CWD is no joke. Those animals suffer tremendously. And then you have, if you're talking about deer, really any other animal, I see groundhogs dead on the side of the road, raccoons, you have the car animal collisions, you have crop damage when you're talking about farmers. And there's limited resources because people like to spread out. And when we spread out and we develop that swath of mountain, or we develop that field, we are taking away habitat. Yeah. And so hunters play a really important role in terms of ensuring that our wildlife isn't suffering at greater levels.
Absolutely, Patty. And, like I said, when you'd offered and invited me onto your show, I jumped at the opportunity because I would much rather talk to folks that don't understand what hunters contribute to the quality of life of animals versus those that do. Not everyone's going to agree. No matter what I say, no matter what I explain, they're going to disagree with it. I get that. But I will tell you that Pennsylvania has a great army of conservationists, and our hunters were the original conservationists. And we do an awful lot of work that helps every species of wildlife. If you want to see something terrible, do a Google search on bear mange. We have a problem. Primarily, it's, I think, centered right now in north central Pennsylvania. But I've seen pictures. I just saw a picture just Wednesday of a bear that is local here to northern Dauphin, western Schuylkill County, and it looks like it has the start of mange. And what happens is, bears live in dens, and those dens can be shared with coyotes or fox or raccoons. And, Mother Nature is not as gentle as hunters are. And as the animal's population grows larger than their habitat can handle, something has to give. And unfortunately, if we don't control these species of wildlife, Mother Nature will control them, and it's a very painful suffering that they go through. Mm-hmm. When that terrible thing happened out in Brookville this past deer season, when those two young guys abused that deer that they had shot, the loudest voices of objection on that I heard was coming from the hunting community. Mm-hmm. We all were offended by that, hunters, non-hunters, because that's just not what this is about, and that's not the way hunters handle wildlife. I'm a big animal lover too. My current chocolate lab is a rescue, and I would never purposely abuse an animal, and I don't consider hunting to be an abusive situation. It's conservation. It is a way to ensure that the wildlife population stays within the limits of its habitat, and that's why we have an agency that looks out for our resources, applies science to make the decisions on it. And again, getting back to what we at PFSC believe in is those decisions need to come from the Pennsylvania Game Commission and not from legislators. There is a bill that's thankfully lying dormant that was relative to trapping bobcats. And people, they feel attached to these cats. They don't want them harmed and all that. Well, listen, if we don't harvest some of them And the studies that are done through those that are harvested, decisions that helps to make, that improves the population going forward. I will tell you that no species was ever hunted to extinction through regulated hunting.
Right.
You know, that's not what hunters do. It's not what hunting is designed to do.
Yeah.
And I teach hunter education. I've been an instructor for hunter education as a volunteer for the Game Commission for over 20 years. And I like to, use this analogy to the kids. The difference between conservation and preservation, if you go out and you go Halloween trick-or-treating and you end up with a big bag of candy, conservationists would make sure that they space out how much candy they're eating and they make it last maybe all the way till Christmas, or at least until Thanksgiving, when more food and more goodies hit the table. A preservationist means you take that candy, you put it in a bag and you seal it up. And if you don't ever use it, it's eventually going to go to waste and something bad's going to happen to it. And that's what the hunting community does. You know, we're making wise use of our resource, and it's not, I wish people would see that about conservation and hunting, that it's not something that we're out there death and destruction and abusing and those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I tried to explain that. I do get that question a lot, how do those two things live inside of me? But to me, it's really obvious, and it's really what's best for the animal population. And that's what I want.
Yeah.
And it kills me to see, I probably shouldn't say this because this is being recorded, but nonetheless, we live in a development where we've got a ton of deer. And of course, our dogs run to the window because they somehow realize there's deer in the front yard. Well, we had one year a deer that was walking through and he was limping. I think it was a doe. She was limping really badly. And I ran to the closet and I got the dog leash and I started putting my shoes on it. My husband is like, "What are you doing?" I have to help it. He's like, "You are out of your mind," But it's really true, when people and animal and wildlife collide, it's not pretty, and the animals are always the one that are going to lose. And
Absolutely.
If you are opposed to animal suffering,
yes,
then I don't know how you could be opposed to hunting, because really that is trying to negate that issue and make sure that what we have survives and thrives.
Yeah.
So,
one of the recent grants that PFSC and our educational arm, the Pennsylvania Wildlife Federation, made was, we did a $1,500 donation to 3 wildlife rehabilitation centers, one in Schuylkill Haven, out in Schuylkill County, one up in north central Pennsylvania, and one out in the Northwest. We gave each of those 3 rehabilitators $500 to buy lead test kits, because raptors are affected by minuscule amounts of lead. And Pennsylvania hunters are trying to do what's best, trying to help these eagles and other raptors that are consuming a tiny little piece of lead that they're picking up in whatever food source they're feeding on. We're educating hunters about, if you're out hunting groundhogs and you shoot a groundhog, again, you're controlling a nuisance pest that causes crop damage, causes injuries to other farm animals, stepping in holes and things like that. So we're trying to educate that you got to cover that stuff up. You don't want to have that exposed. And ammunition manufacturers are doing more and more with non-toxic bullets and non-toxic shot that can be used to avoid some of that as well. So Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen and Conservationists stands with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, who is also looking at doing a major contribution to lead poisoning in these raptors as well. So we're more together than we know with those that are concerned for the protection of animals and
Yeah.
be they domestic or wild.
Yeah. And everything's connected. Everything.
Yes.
Even if you don't think so, if you just stop, it's like the what's that 7 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, right? Everything is connected. If you sit down, you can follow the path, whether it's from, the mouse living in your basement to the cat to the hawk to the, and it just goes on and on and on.
I
And
think we all, yeah, I think we all love the old movie It's a Wonderful Life, right? Where
yeah,
lead guy gets to see all the good that he had done and all the effect that he has had on people. Well, I don't think it would be called It's a Wonderful Life if we could remove conservationists, hunters off the landscape and look 10, 20 years down the road with what's affected by not having wildlife management being done in Pennsylvania. It would not be a wonderful life, I guarantee you that.
well, and at some point the government would step in and take over the role as the hunters, because
And we would be paying for it.
that's right. And it would, I don't want to say it wouldn't be, but I would be hesitant to say it would be done as humanely as hunters do. So
I don't think that the resource would be put to the use that it's put to today. We have programs like Hunter Sharing to Harvest that donates thousands and thousands of pounds of venison to food banks and needy folks, and that's what hunters bring to the table, and why people need to be more supportive of wildlife management here in Pennsylvania.
yeah, I agree completely.
And we're in good shape. Pennsylvania typically, if you ask people, do you support hunting? Are you an anti-hunter or are you a non-hunter, that you're neutral? About 80% of the folks are non-hunters. They don't hunt themselves. They're like you, Patty. You don't actively hunt yourself at the current time, but you don't begrudge the right of people to go out and hunt.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
As long as we keep those 80% educated and on our side, we're going to be good.
And that's the key, education. Just
Yeah.
combating that propaganda that's out there. And listen, propaganda benefits someone else. It never benefits the person that's hearing it.
Yeah.
Regardless of the topic.
Yeah.
So, think things through for yourself and understand and do some research before you just automatically take your news from Facebook, because the truth is out there somewhere, but it's generally not in your news feed. That's all I'm going to say.
That's right. And another point about conservation that I would like your audience to hear is that it has to be a bipartisan effort. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I talk to conservationists a lot about is ignoring that letter that's in the parentheses and not allowing that to dictate who you're going to be voting for. Because as a lobbyist, I'm a registered lobbyist with this job. I deal with folks on both sides of the aisle, and there are vast differences of opinion. If I'm talking to Republicans, from one Republican to the next, when I talk to Democrats, from one Democrat to the next. That letter in parentheses does not identify the person that's representing us. And that's important for everybody to know, that we need to be a bipartisan effort out there when we're fighting for clean environment and wildlife resources and habitat and all those things. Because you mentioned the big one, if we didn't have hunters fighting for where we're protecting habitat and keeping spaces open, it's not going to be good. We're, like you said, we like to spread out. We have this sprawl going on, and boy, it's really exciting in Pennsylvania to know that we have 1.5 million acres of state game lands, and we have 80-some thousand miles of waterways that we can be on, and we have 200-some thousand acres of state forest land that we can be on, and several 100,000 acres of national forests that we can be on. And we need to share those wild places share them responsibly and safely, and make sure that we're doing the right things for our wildlife and for our environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so is there any current legislation out there for sportsmen or for the environment that you all are keeping a close eye on, or have been behind, or maybe you're opposed to?
Sure. I'll cover a couple things. Here about a month ago, we had a really, really good run of a week or so in Harrisburg, where lots of really good legislation was passed relative to conservation. People don't realize this, but when you're talking about the hunting and fishing agencies, they are not supported by the general fund. So by that I mean, we are not paying taxes to these agencies that are looking out for our wild resources. So unfortunately, they did not have the ability, either the Game Commission or the Fish Commission, neither one had the ability to set their own, my phone's going off.
Sorry.
They didn't have the ability to set their own fees. So what would happen is, we could go right now, we're at a state of probably 15, 20 years without a hunting or a fishing license increase. And then finally, when things are really in bad shape, the legislature decides, okay, we're going to grant these guys the ability to set their fees up a little bit. And what that does is that takes those agencies, and they have to look not at what they need to make up the shortfalls that they may be experiencing today, but try to predict 15 or 20 years into the future, when the next time that the legislature would allow them to set their license fees, what are they going to need? Mm-hmm. And that's why we would see big, huge jumps in the cost of our licenses. Now, about a month ago, House Bill 808 was passed, and that piece of legislation was allowing the Pennsylvania Fish Commission to set their own license fees. Now, it's going to have oversight through the legislature. If the legislators don't like what they see, if they feel the Fish Commission is going too high on their cost, they have a mechanism that they can stop it from happening. So there is still that oversight, but it's going to create an opportunity for this agency to run like a business. And when you look at the Game Commission and the Fish Commission, not touching tax dollars, and they're running a very responsible budget, and they're not running a deficit, right? We should be really excited about that. Unfortunately, instead, there was recently an audit against on the Game Commission, and quite frankly, I took exception to the way that audit was presented. I didn't think it was fair. That was a bipartisan effort, by the way. There was one person from each party that was involved in that, and we need to support this idea of these agencies being able to set their own fees. So we got the Fish Commission done. Now we need to try to get the Game Commission done. It doesn't mean they're going to raise their fees. What it means is when they have to raise their fees, instead of seeing a $10 jump, we might see a 50-cent jump in a year. What happens when this current process, where 15 years down the road, they're trying to plan, where do I need to be? We end up losing this license holders. People stop hunting, people stop fishing, because it's such a huge hit.
Yeah.
So we were really excited about 808, and we were really thrilled when that got passed. And we had another piece of legislation that some of your listeners might be scratching their head. Why would we want this? And it's the night vision for predator hunting. Basically, what it is it's infrared devices that you put on top of your gun, and you can see in the dark. It looks like a black and white movie. Well, the reason that is so important for predator hunters is the way we do that in Pennsylvania today is we use a red light, and you look for the eyes of the animal. And it's effective, but it can be so much more effective with this technology, and so much safer, because hunters can see exactly where they're shooting, what they're shooting at, and what's behind it. Mm-hmm. And so we were really excited to get 1188 through, and the governor signed that here not too long ago as well. So looking forward into the future, the Game Commission one is a big one. We need to get some things done on CWD, either through legislation or through regulation. I'm not sure which way we're going to have to go on that yet. But the impact that CWD could have on conservation can't be overstated. If the prevalency rate of this disease hits our whitetails to the point where people don't want to be handling them, they don't want to be eating them, we're going to lose hunters, and we're going to lose a lot of them. And then we're going to end up, instead of having hunters paying for the opportunity to do game management, we would end up as taxpayers probably having to pay the government to bring sharpshooters in and those types of things to thin down the deer herd. So those are some hot button issues that we're tracking. Always looking at the clean water laws that are being proposed. Some of those we can support, some of those we have to oppose quite a bit. You know, they're trying to take some of the controls or regulation away, and so that's kind of a look into the future as to, you know, what we're trying to support and watch out for here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I want to circle back because you said something that is a pet peeve of mine, that legislators think they know best. And they don't take other people's advice under consideration. Really, legislators, if you think about it, make their decision based on whether or not it's going to get them reelected. Mm-hmm. And when you have decisions being made like that, especially decisions based on what the state needs, what our wildlife population needs, what our environment needs, that's not going to get you to the end goal. You've got to transfer those decisions to the agencies that work in that area every single day, that are immersed in it, that know it inside and out, backwards, forwards. And so that to me is so important, is getting those things like you talked about out of the hands of the legislators and into the people who know what's best. And until we can do that, I think that's like a really important fight that we need to carry on.
Yeah, we have a lot going on in Harrisburg right now, and I'm sure you probably noticed this too, Patty. It used to be that you really expected things in Harrisburg to move at a very, very slow pace. You have an idea. These legislative sessions run for 2 years, and you were really battling the clock in a 2-year period to get the legislation done before the bills expired and had to be reintroduced. Well, along comes COVID, and my gosh, Harrisburg is turning out legislation in the matter of days. Some of that legislation, let's face it, you know, we were shut down there for quite a while. That's a big impact on tax revenues. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of folks out there right now looking at where the money is going and how can they, you know, steal from Peter to pay Paul kind of a thing. And one of the big hot button items that I've been getting involved in more and more are pieces of legislation that are trying to gut funding out of conservation, out of the Keystone Fund and some other funds that are designed to protect wild places, clean environments, and those types of things. So we have to be very, very cautious of that. And when we got shut down, we had some instances where some of our gun clubs and things were shut down. And mm-hmm. These are outdoor activities. Why in the world are we shutting down outdoor activities that we're doing one-on-one, you know? And there was legislation that we were battling over about that as well. And I'm sure that'll continue to come up. We would like to see some legislation passed that protects the Second Amendment and that protects us from being shut down and being able to protect ourselves and mm-hmm. get out there and shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think what it boils down to is, you know, we have a responsibility to fight for the environment and do what's right, because it can't do it on its own.
Right.
And so I'm always thankful to groups like yours, and other groups that do that. And because if we don't step up now to take control and to do what's right, the next generation and the one after that and the one after that, they're going to have a hot mess on their hands, if it's survivable, here. I mean,
Well, we need to take our tip from those 5 angry fishermen back in 1932. I mean, think about this. These 5 guys put together this organization that I now work for 88 years later, at a time when there was no turnpike, there was no Route 80, telephones were not yet around, and they put this together. And it's been a very influential protector of all things outdoors in Pennsylvania. If they could do that in 1932, Patty, I think we can do that same thing today, and make sure that we stay strong and stay united in this thing. But I did want to ask you a question. I saw a picture of you out on a gun range. Did you enjoy shooting that day?
Absolutely. I do enjoy it, I have to admit.
Yeah.
I have a handgun.
It's 3 o'clock.
I like shooting that, and to me it's a challenge.
Yeah.
When we go, I'm always super hard on myself, and I'll say to my husband Brad, be like, there's still some center that I can see in that target. And he's like, who cares? You hit the target, they're all, clustered together, you're doing awesome. But for me, it's like, I have to get every single bit of that little star going.
You gotta come out and shoot shotgun with me sometime. We'll go shoot some sporting clays or something, and
yes,
that'll really get you hooked. If you're that competitive, that'll be fun.
I've done clays before.
Okay.
I love it, but not near enough to be good at it. But yeah, I want to do that some more. But yeah, right. I really enjoy it. And it's, it's something that you can do as a pastime and as a hobby. Just because I own a gun doesn't mean I'm going to, go out and kill people, or, go on a rampage.
I gotta share this story with the folks that are watching.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, I woke up one morning at 4 a.m. and someone was pounding on my door, and I grabbed my protection gun and went downstairs, and there were 2 guys at my door, and when they saw that I had a firearm, they took off running. And I called the police, and I said, look, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if these people broke down. It was in February. It was cold out. That was in 1990. I called 911. It's July 24th of 2020 now. And I'm still waiting on the state police. I live very rural up in northern Coffee County. I'm still waiting on the state police to come and check on me 30 years later.
Oh my God.
So the Second Amendment is very important.
It is.
And I know there's some folks that, may not agree with that, but that's a live experience that I can tell you that it happened to me. And, when seconds count, unfortunately, the police are probably minutes away. So we need to have that ability to protect ourselves.
Yep, absolutely. And so if anybody watching, I know you said it earlier, but if they want to get involved, and I will put all this information in the comments under the video so that it stays together for always. But if anybody wants to get involved, can you give your website again? And
Absolutely. So our website is www.pfsc.org. And keep your eye out for us. We're going to be starting up some events, moving around the state. We're going to have a big super raffle promotion coming up here very soon, that you're going to have to be a member to belong. You have to belong to the organization to be a part of this super raffle. We have a website, a Facebook page out there for the public. And then once you do join PFSC, we do have a members only Facebook page as well. But if anybody's interested and they want to know more, look me up on Facebook. I'm easily accessible, and I would love to talk to anyone that might have an interest in coming and joining PFSC and getting involved. I see Dwayne Dunmeyer joined the call. Dwayne is someone I spoke to 2 years ago, I guess, Dwayne, or a year ago, and he said, "How can I help?" And he got involved in Lebanon County and is helping us out there get PFSC rejuvenated and growing again. So
yeah,
good to see you, Dwayne.
And let's see if we have any questions on Facebook that we didn't answer. And in the meantime, if anybody that's on the Zoom has any questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself. And
no questions on Facebook.
okay. We're usually really good about getting through all the questions during the conversation, I must admit.
This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed being on with you.
Same here. Thank you so much. And I encourage everybody to take a look at the Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen and Conservationists. Even if you are a hunter and you don't get involved much in conservation, or if you're a conservationist who doesn't hunt, the organization does do a lot of things for a lot of different issues, and you don't have to agree on all of them to get involved and work on some of them. So I highly encourage everybody to get involved, and thank you so much for what you do and for joining me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Always good to see you, Patty.
Yep, you too. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yep. Bye-bye.